This is the Kitsap Sons Editorial Board. We're meeting with Travis Couture. You are a candidate for a 35th District Senate position. What we'll do is just let you have 2 minutes to introduce yourself and kind of tell us who you are, and then we'll go into some questions. Jim Campbell's he'll keep an eye on the clock and kind of wave at you when you get to 2 minutes or so. But go ahead.
Well, I'm Travis Couture. I'm a former U.S. Navy veteran. I served a little over 5 years out here on the submarines USS Alabama and Nebraska. I own 2 little small ventures, and I currently I'm an associate with Lockheed Martin up on Naval Base Bangor. So I'm pretty familiar with Kitsap. I'm generally concerned about how our government is operating these days in Washington State, and I feel like I'm 26 years old, and that if we continue to go down the same path, there'll be nothing left over for people my age, and or my potential kids or our kids and grandkids. And I feel like we have to do something and stop kicking the can down the road. And so what I've been saying is that we can no longer continue to elect the same politicians year after year and expect them to pull us out of the messes that they helped to create. I spent the last 3 years in Olympia as a citizen, lobbying to, not officially lobbying, but trying to help pass legislation, testifying on bills, figuring out how the process works. I know how the process works, and let me just tell you that there's absolutely an amount of corruption in Olympia that has to end. And it's because, in my view, that there's the fourth house. They control a lot of things that go on, and there's people that have been there for a long time. And in the 35th District, one party has controlled the 35th District and Olympia for over 20 years, almost 30 years now. And nothing's getting any better, especially in rural 35th, where it's a little bit different than Seattle. It's a little bit different than Bremerton or Olympia. It's more of a rural community with rural traditions and values. And I'm from a rural area, so I understand what those are. And I feel like I'm ready to lead this district into a more prosperous future.
Where are you from?
I'm from Williston, North Dakota.
Williston, North Dakota. Okay.
Yep. I did live in Spokane for a while too.
North Dakota, Spokane, and out here. Tell me elaborate on what you were doing in Olympia last. You said 3 years you've been down during the session to work on. What have you been doing down there?
Well, I worked with a team of legislators. They call themselves the Freedom Agenda, and it's Matt Shade, David Taylor, Jason Overstreet, Elizabeth Scott, and a few others. And there's some Democrats in there as well. We worked with Sherry Appleton once, and usually my views don't coincide with hers, but sometimes that's where bipartisanship comes in. You can find common ground on things that you agree and get things done. Well, they passed the most bipartisan set of bills in history in Olympia, and it wasn't widely reported on, but it was things like passing, and almost unanimously all times, industrial hemp. I worked on that bill, regulating the use of spy drones in Washington State, and we worked on that one. It was sadly vetoed by the governor. We worked on trying to defeat gun control, and a lot of things just like that. But there was a large swath from the left and the right. And for instance, I'm more to the right, and Miss Appleton is more to the left. We both worked on this drone regulation bill because we believe in the Fourth Amendment. So we were both protecting constitutional rights. But that's what I did in Olympia.
And what was your experience? What was your job with that group of people?
I just kind of did went wherever I felt I needed to go. I met with legislators to help push certain pieces of legislation, just like any citizen can do with their legislator. But I went to more than just my own. I went around to anyone that would listen to try to help gather support, or sometimes even educate people on what the issue was, because it's kind of hard to expect the legislator to know everything about every single issue. So, if you're in a position to sit down and go over the issue with somebody, then that's pretty powerful too. It might sway their opinion in the committee. That's the thing, a lot of bills don't make it out of committee, and there's a lot of good bills that don't make it out of committee. Some of them get marked up. We had a good cottage cottage foods bill that we were pushing, and it ended up passing, but it was marked up. But sometimes you take baby steps getting to where you need to go.
So it sounds like you have some like fairly specific interests in working with this group and some of the things you've already named. Maybe elaborate a little bit on that and what are the things that are priorities to you? Besides,
think,
everyone
yeah.
talks about education, transportation. There's the big
Right.
ones.
Those are the
get
hot
to those.
topics right
But
now,
it sounds
but
like you maybe have some other interests too.
Right. I think that as a politician or a legislator, your main job is to, follow the Constitution. Mainly, you take an oath to it. You got to follow it. That's just first and foremost. You have some pretty simple jobs. It's follow the Constitution, balance the budget, protect people's inalienable rights that are laid out in the Constitution. And so that's where we kind of start. And there's some more liberal legislators that believe in some of the constitutional standpoints that Republicans do, and sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle, and we could work on some of those things. For instance, even me and Kathy Haig don't agree a lot. Representative Haig from my district, but she is in support of the Second Amendment, so we could work with her on something like that. So it's finding the common ground. But as far as when I kind of looked at the landscape, the political landscape, I guess, of, the Democrats control the House, and there's a majority coalition caucus in the Senate, and then there's Governor Inslee. You've got to realistically think about what can really be done. And so we worked on industrial hemp because we've already legalized marijuana. It doesn't make any sense why hemp was illegal, because you can't get high off of it. You'd have to smoke something the size of a foam pole, and you'd die from lung asphyxiation before you ever got anything out of it. But it's a good industrial crop, and right now we import it all from Canada and Indonesia to make thousands of different products. And we could, basically what we were saying is, let's open up a whole new market to Washington State. And recently the Congress eliminated hemp from the list of illegal substances for research and things like that, in which the universities will be researching under this bill. And that did pass, and it was signed by the governor. Or not signed by the governor yet, but it did time out, but it probably will be.
Other things along those lines that you think, you would come in with maybe a different perspective than people who you've kind of said you don't like people who are there doing the job.
Yeah, I don't,
so.
A lot of politicians will probably get up here in front of you and say, they probably got their sheet with all their prepared lines. I don't ever write anything for a speech. I just go off of what I know, and I have a passion for it, so I could get pretty deep on the issues sometimes. Sometimes I'm told to dumb it down a little bit, but there's sometimes that you just got to stand up and say what you are. And I am a Republican, but I am a more libertarian Republican. I can be pretty conservative on some things, but there's a libertarian streak that's kind of catching fire. And I think that it's a focus on civil liberties, and I think that's where that libertarian streak is, where we were able to work together with Democrats and Republicans. So my opponent would say that the majority coalition caucus, that's a coalition, that's bipartisan. There's only one Democrat on it, so I don't really see how it's that much of a coalition. It's more like a power play in my eyes. But they didn't really work on anything substantial to really move us forward in the right direction. So I think that true bipartisanship is when you find the common ground between people, and sometimes it takes a while. Politics should not be a knee-jerk reaction. Legislation should not be a knee-jerk reaction. It's when we get ourselves into trouble and we write bad laws and it hurts people. So I think that sometimes you have to take the time and you have to battle it out in a battle of ideas and find out what's right and what's wrong, and just be honest.
How does I'm just going to follow on, you're calling yourself more of a libertarian. Libertarian Republican is kind of a beat. Where does that put your views on something like the education reform that's going on in our state right now? How do you look at it differently than even maybe the Republican caucus looks at things right now?
Well, you mean the majority coalition caucus?
Uh-huh. Or just
yeah, so here's the thing. They expanded Medicaid and accepted Obamacare and got a huge paycheck from the federal government, and they used that as a large down payment on the McCleary decision, which was about $1 billion or so. But the thing is there's no real significant reforms in my eyes, unless you count Common Core as a reform. But you could reform things, but you could also reform them in the wrong direction. And I think Common Core is more of the top-down stuff that even liberals fight against sometimes. But I think that since it's being pushed from the top down, that's what's wrong. That Common Core is something I'm definitely against. I think that we need things like more school choice, and I think that I'm right in line with my district and the people of Washington when I say that we need more school choice, and they're hungry for that. In 2012, they passed an initiative for charter schools. There are some things in the law that I don't agree with, but the spirit and intent of passing that, which is what they're voting for, is that they want increased school choice. And I think that if we're giving billions of more dollars into the public education system without any significant reform, I like to say you could throw 20 bucks on the lawn, but it doesn't mow the grass. You can't just pour money into something and expect it to get better. The whole reason why we have to put more money in it because it was broken in the first place. There's so many unfunded mandates. The bureaucracy is really top down. Teachers haven't got a COLA raise in, 5 years now, which I'm for, because I see that's something I'd probably be on the other side of. I think they voted not to put that in there, the teacher COLA, but I think that if the citizens of Washington pass an initiative, unless it's blatantly unconstitutional, then you have a duty to uphold the will of the people. And so in that, it's an easy decision. I don't have to think about my where I stand with the teachers union or public education or anything like that. The citizens passed, we want our teachers to be paid more, and then the legislature should execute it.
One of the things in the that you talked about is, you mentioned education alternatives. We got charter schools.
But it's not enough, though.
That's not enough.
If you read how many charter schools will be coming in, it's only a handful in 40 years or something like that, and all of them will go to urban places like King County. My district's really rural, whereas our charter schools, we passed it as well. Why don't we get to have the choice? This is only King County or Seattle or Spokane or some other urban center, Bellevue, that gets charter schools. The urban or the rural communities are really being ignored in Olympia because it's really Seattle heavy top down. And I think that we have someone like Tim Shelton, who's been in office in my district for a very long time, either in the Senate or the House, almost as long as I've been alive, and nothing has gotten done. And I think that it's failure of leadership. I think I accomplished more as a citizen than he actually accomplished as a legislator in the last 2 years. And I firmly believe that. But I think that we need someone who's fresh, who could come in with kind of a bulldog mentality and has a different view, a think outside the box kind of view. Because we just have too many career politicians that don't know how to think outside that box. They think inside of their, they have a certain way that things are supposed to be done and have to be done, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I think people are starting to turn away from career politicians for the same thing, because it's the same old broken record every single time. And we have to elect someone different.
What does it mean doing something differently? How do you approach it differently to not be a broken record? What does specifically that mean?
For instance, what's one thing I could pull out? Everything's always election posturing. The gas tax is election posturing. You won't hear that in the media, you won't hear it in the newspaper. But, if you ask the Olympia insiders and people who've been there forever, it's all about what bill can they push forward and make an issue out of to, election posture for the next year so they can get the issues on their side. The Democrats do it. They did it with pot and gay marriage, and it's about trying to win over the populace. And then Republicans will do it with taxes and so on and so forth. And they, so, I'm not really a party person,
So do you
per
mean
se.
do you mean you need to avoid talking about those things? Is that what you're saying? Is by debating the gas tax?
No, I'm not saying avoid talking about them, but I'm saying that the intentions behind what they're doing is not necessarily the greatest. Their intentions is to win re-election, and it has nothing to do with increasing in debate. It has nothing to do, but here's the thing, as a taxpayer, I'm sick and tired of having my tax dollars, and I'm sure everyone else is, used for political purposes, used, we might raise your taxes and we're calling the other side's bluff on this, but hey, what if you didn't? Then my gas taxes are gonna get raised 12 cents, per gallon. So that's just something I'm not for. And we keep seeing the same things. For instance, the budget. Every time they go and they balance the budget, it's not really balanced. They're shifting funds from one account to another. This is why we can't fund education first. Education is the paramount duty, but when Republicans try to go pass a bill that says fund education first, fund it in its separate budget and put it in a separate line item, the other side turns it down because that wouldn't look good for them. For the same reason that, industrial hemp was turned down the first time because it was a Republican-sponsored bill. We wouldn't want that. And this is the same kind of, it's childish really. And I think if people really knew what was going on, they could sense something's going on, but if they knew what was really going on, they'd be really upset.
You said earlier, because of your age, there's a certain frustration at how things are going to be left for you, or people of your generation. What exactly do you mean by that? What do you think the perspective is, and when you look down the road, this is the thing that I want to fix now
Right.
for people who are my age?
Well, over 50% of millennials now say that their future looks bleak. And all the polls say that. And I feel that way. And a lot of people my age feel that way. This is why there's so much apathy in politics with people my age. Is why how do we get a hold of the young vote? And that's why people talk about that kind of stuff. And year after year, it seems like there's, you're paying more in taxes. The wages never rise, but the inflation on the money does. And, so you're making less and less. If you're a high school student nowadays, how are you gonna find a job? At $15 an hour, who's gonna hire you? There's a lack of prosperity, and it keeps, the gap keeps growing. And I think something one of my opponents said, falling through the cracks. I think that's a good term. This generation's falling through the cracks, and not everything is to do with the state. There's some federal issues as well, kind of parlay into that. But the thing is if you're a young person, and you're 40 or below or 35 and below, you probably feel like you're just spinning in circles, and that there's not a real opportunity down the road. And that's easy to fix though, and that's the thing. It's not really that bleak. You just got to have the right people in there to fix it, and you got to have the right message. And that message is what is the purpose of government? What is it here to do? And what exactly should it be doing? And should it be wasting and abusing your tax dollars? And we talk about increasing a minimum wage. What about giving them more of the money they already earned back? No one's talking about that, because as long as the state gets to keep its clutches on your wallet, nobody cares, right? And nobody, left or right, nobody disagrees with the fact that the government's always out to grab your cash. I think Irene Bowling had told me that, we just need to find creative ways to stick our hands into people's pockets, and I think that's a direct quote. That stuff's scary, especially for rural districts like mine, where the unemployment could be upwards of 20% when you start counting people who've dropped out of the workforce. There's a lot of disingenuous numbers, but it's, even if you go by the numbers that they give you, it's still pretty high anyways. Our industries are falling apart. Timber is a ghost of what it used to be. Shellfish is having its recent problems with China and so on, and its water quality.
What's that 35th district's senator's job as far as those two aspects? Timber, shellfish, other industries in Mason County that could be job producers.
I think
what's your
I
role
think when it comes to any representative and the industries in their district, that your main job is to give them the freedom to allow them to grow and prosper. And I think that just is not just for industry, that's for small business, and that's for people that just go to work 9 to 5. I don't think there's really any difference. I think that if you get in the way and you pass a bunch of regulations like Growth Management Act and Shoreline Management Act and spotted owls type of things on timber, you're just you're saying to them, go ahead and die, and that's what's wrong. And you're not just killing off big timber. You're not just killing off big fishing industries. You're hurting all the people that work on the factory line or saw the logs or catch the, grab the shellfish off the beach. When you go out and soak the rich, and I know it sounds like it's a warm, fuzzy, knee-jerk reaction, let's go tax the rich people because they should have to pay their fair share. They're the highest corporate tax in the world, first of all. And a lot of those people do get, there's a lot of talk about loopholes. I think that's somewhere where I could break from the Republican Party, is I think that if you truly believe in following the Constitution, all taxes should be uniform. And I think that closing some tax loopholes is not necessarily raising a tax. It's saying, hey, this is the amount you should pay. But I don't think they should pay a high amount. I think they should have to pay as low as we can reasonably achieve, just like everyone else, to perform what our basic essential functions of government are, like public safety and so on and so forth. Education, but we shouldn't be dabbling in a lot of the things that we're dabbling in. We spend way too much money. The lie is that, oh, we need more revenue. We've never had more revenue in Washington State than we've ever had. We've had more than ever before, and we spend more than ever before, and it continually rises each time, and we always need more, and when does that end at one point? Where do you draw the line and say, you have enough of our money and stop spending it on, which most of it gets wasted. And nowhere where you could point this out better than in education and in higher education. We dump billions of dollars into the system, and it goes to bureaucrats who kind of sit around, and then that pads the teachers' union's pocket, and then they get around to, getting whatever support they want to get, and then now the whole state budget is held hostage for the McCleary decision, and which means people are probably going to suffer, because either way people are going to suffer, because there's only two ways out. You have to raise taxes, or you have to cut spending and cut spending and services. Sorry. If you raise taxes, you're going to hurt people at home because everything's going to cost more, and it's going to hurt businesses. That means they can hire less people. And if you cut the spending, people who are dependent on those programs can no longer be a part of them anymore. And so they have to find other means. And so one way or another, people are going to get hurt. And I have a feeling that this $1 billion and what's probably is going to get wasted in the over-bloated administrations on programs that don't work. And I mean, I went to school back I lived in Spokane. I went to K through 12 public school education here, and I got a decent education, and it cost probably an 18th of what it costs today. Why is that? No one in Olympia ever asked the question why? It's just about how can we pull at the heartstrings of the single mom at home who has to send her kids to school, or how do we pull on the heartstrings of people who feel they're overtaxed, one way or another. And it's just a political football, and it is year after year. And if you want to stop it, you have to say, fund it first, put it in its own line item, and then we got to reform it. And I think we should probably reform it first. And we should add in more alternative signal to taxpayers. You're just wasting money. If you pour $1 billion into a system that is inevitably broken.
So are the solutions prescribed by the McCleary decision? Kind of, there's a chart that steps. Here's what we need to do each year for the next next 8 or something like that. Are those the solutions, or is that's not?
No, I think there's a real issue about separation of powers. I don't think that the Supreme Court of Washington should be telling the legislature how to spend money. The power of the purse comes from the legislative body. It doesn't come from the governor, and it doesn't come from the Supreme Court.
Do you think it's appropriate that the Supreme Court said you're not fulfilling your duty and putting that pressure on the state?
If the Supreme Court does have the leeway to say you're not fulfilling your duty, but I don't think it has the ability to put a prescription to it that here's what you must do in order to comply. I don't really believe that that's right. Especially putting a dollar amount on it. That just reeks of corruption to me.
Whose job would it have been then?
I think education is the legislature's job.
The legislature wasn't doing that job, so who needed to tell them how to fix it?
Well, they're not fixing it. That's the problem. Pumping money into it is not a fix. And how you define fixing education, is it more money into the coffers of public education? Or
How would
is
you
it
know?
higher test scores?
Okay,
And
let me ask you a different way. How would you know, let's say you get elected, you're there for a couple of years, how would you know we're better now, we improved? How do I as a voter
Right.
know, oh, okay, they're doing their job right?
Right. Well, one, we don't have any performance measures. We need better performance measures, and we need to be able to test scores, and not the same tests as we've been performing. And I have a plan on, and it's on my website.
Doesn't Common Core have performance measures?
Yes,
Is
but
that
their
point?
top-down performance measures is a lot different. I'm talking about eliminating the testing we have now and replacing it with the Iowa test of basic skills, which is a lot better and it's cheaper. So I think that's what we should be doing, is trying to raise the quality of the education and lower the price. And I think that when you add in the alternatives to education, you create competition and you treat education as a market good. And when you start treating education as a market good and there's more competition in the marketplace, higher quality, lower prices. And that's exactly what we should be shooting for, because it's too expensive and the quality is not good enough. And this is what voters want. Voters passed the initiative in 2012 for charter schools. And I'm sure if you put more to the ballot, they would ask for that too. But it was a little disingenuous because it doesn't allow for enough. But the spirit and intent of the initiative is what they wanted. So.
One of the other things on your platform is the phrase "strengthen families." What do you think the state's role is in doing that?
As far as?
Oh, you said I want to get in there and we want to strengthen families. That should be. That's.
Oh yeah, I
what
mean,
is the state's
education's a good
state's
example. I
responsibility?
mean, I prefer that things be done on the local level. And if you're talking about, yet again, things like Common Core, you have the state come down with rules. You have the state does this, the state does that. It's this big top down, and it tears away local control. Stuff like the No Child Left Behind money, stuff that happened last time. That kind of stuff tears away local control, and it doesn't give the local school boards power. If you give local school boards more power over the education system, you give parents a choice, then you're empowering that family. And I think that empowering families is, making sure that we have more jobs in this economy. I think that you empower them by, lowering the amount of tax burden they have and allow them to prosper and grow. I think that's strengthening families. But, it's kind of a broad brushstroke, really.
How do you separate yourself from your opponents? What's different about you the voters won't find in the other two?
Right. I mean, I always say that I'm a person that I'm going to tell you how it is every single time. I'm not going to try to mince words. I'm not afraid of people. I'm not afraid of political backlash. I don't actually receive any money from corporation or big out-of-state corporations or lobbyists or big union fat cats. I don't get any of that. My opponents do. Irene receives all the union money, and Tim receives all the big out-of-state corporations and all the lobbyists money. And I'm more of a grassroots campaign. Every dime I've raised is from real people in the state who are registered voters, and a few from family back home. But that's I go out and I doorbell and I get down and I try to. Just last summer, I live in Belfair, and there's a real drug problem there. And we started something called Hope for Belfair, and we did a little rally right there in downtown Belfair. Got a lot of stuff, got a lot of recognition for it, and we built a group that went out into the community to go clean up drug paraphernalia. There's a lot of sharps, a lot of needles and stuff like that hanging around. So we built a group that would go around and clean a lot of that stuff up and try to help people who are addicted to drugs. So I'm more of an action-oriented kind of person, and I don't try to sit around and play political poker, so to speak. But I'm more of a statesman. I'm not a politician. I follow the Constitution. It's black and white to me, and I'm not afraid to say no. And I think that's where kind of career politicians go wrong. They lost that. They lost the vision and the passion of why am I here? Why did I come here in the first place? And now it's more of a career. I never call this a career. I don't think that being an elected official should be a career. You shouldn't have to be there that long. I think there should be term limits. And you know, I always choose. I'm not a big party line tower. I think you could probably tell that from, you know, there's been a few things hiding out there about that. But, you know, I always choose principle over party and people over politics. And I feel like I've been pretty consistent with that, not only in this run, but in my last run for the Mason County Commissioner seat. So I say the same thing on Monday as I said on Tuesday, or on Sunday, and you know, I don't change with the political wind. I don't lift my chat finger to the political winds to see which way they're blowing that day. I'm a real person, and I mean, you saw me. I came in here. I just came from work. I work a job like everyone else. I don't, you know. And so it's what we need to start electing is real people who can do real things, and less career politicians who are more self-interested with maintaining their career status or going to swanky parties and courting lobbyists. You know, let's start courting people and not lobbyists.
You guys want to ask something?
Yeah, you're out from Belfair, and 35th also includes an area in Kitsap County called the Skia.
Mm-hmm.
And
South Kitsap Industrial.
Yeah, that's an area that has, you know, some potential for economic development. There's a Belfair bypass involved. There's a Skia road or road that's going in before too long. What do you see as your job in the Senate to help with some economic development in that area, in that Skia facility?
Yeah, I mean, we got to make that area and Belfair more accommodating to businesses. For a long time, and this was an issue when I ran for county commissioner, there was a moratorium on new business in Belfair. And the sewer right now, and I think as of today, it was a little over 800,000 in the hole, because we've got less than half of the hookups needed. And I think that the sewer is a big mess. That was put into Skia. But the Belfair bypass is going to definitely be needed. And that's something people from my district seem to promise every single election cycle and never pull through on. But I think that with Tim Sheldon's, he's the Senate President Pro Tem, he's on the Transportation Committee, and he had a lead role in negotiating every single budget for the last 2 years, and it would have been peanuts compared to all the other things in there, and it didn't get done. But we've wasted millions of dollars doing environmental impact studies and watching landowners fight over who's going to get their slice of the government pie when they lay the road in there. But if you want to build a Belfair bypass, you can't put it in the transportation budget. It'll never get done. The DOT is absolutely broken, which I'm sure that a lot of people can see. We have a $1 billion tunnel boring machine, Big Bertha. That could have been spent on education right there. You know, we have ferries that list to one side. The DOT's punching holes in other ferries. You know, we have pontoons that don't float and bridges that are crumbling down. I mean, it's just a total failure. The Columbia River crossing was an epic amount of waste and fraud and abuse inside of that package. You know, and in my district, we don't need things like light rail. We're a rural district. You have to drive, and when you're talking about vehicle miles added kind of tax, that's a tax on the rural community, and that helps out the urban communities. And this is where the Seattle-centric kind of top-down kind of comes into play. And this is where the legislators' minds are at. You know, what does Seattle want? And we don't need mass transit. We don't need light rail in the 35th. We don't need a light rail going from Belfair to Shelton. You know, that's not really going to work out. So there's a lot of transportation issues. But yeah, back to the original. If you want to grow along that sector, you need that Belfair bypass. And if you need to save yourself from that Belfair sewer, you can't tear it down. It's already been built, right? You have to lay down that bypass and hook up sewer lines and along the bypass. And then here's one of my biggest plans. I'm proposing a 5-year B&O tax holiday, kind of like an innovation zone for new businesses And I think that in liberal New York, they did a 10-year basically tax holiday for new businesses. If New York could do 10, we can at least do 5. And I don't see how, if they could do that in New York, then Jay Inslee wouldn't go along with it, or the Democrats in the House if it remains that way come the end of 2014. And this would be a huge amount of growth for new businesses, because the low to middle income entrepreneur is absolutely dying away because they look out to a sea of red tape and regulations that they just cannot comply with. There's too many fees, too many taxes, and it's really hard to start up. You got to make it easier to start up, and you got to stop just being that linchpin that just burdens especially new fledgling businesses. And that 5 years is a good basis, because that's about how long it takes to pay interest on a loan. You know, so you know, you could get a lot of things done. And if your business has lasted that 5 years, then you're probably going to be good. That's the general consensus. If you could be in business for 5 years, the rough patches have been, you've crossed a lot of rough bridges already, right? So I think that we can do a lot of things to grow, but I think that government gets in the way of that growth and all that innovation, and we need to free it up, just like New York did, so that we could start growing. And that's directly to be in competition with Texas, who's doing really well.
Anything down here? Travis, I'll let you, if there's anything, we've covered a lot of topics, but I'll let you have a short closing statement if there's anything that we didn't touch on or something you want to leave us with.
Yeah, I think that there's more issues. I think the ones being tossed around are education and transportation. Another thing I don't agree with is the DREAM Act that was passed in the legislature last year, which gives tax dollars to illegal immigrants for college tuition. And I don't have a problem with anyone going to college or anything like that, but I think that giving my tax dollars to someone who's broken the law to go get an education, when we have already a long line of people waiting to get an education who are already here legally or citizens of the state, I think that's wrong, and that's something that Tim voted on, and it was passed, and I'm pretty upset about that as well. And you know, I'm generally worried about we just keep doing all these same things, and we just keep dishing out more of the government loot to whatever interest group wants it the most, and it's not just government's, it's our money. That's what we have to realize. Healthcare is a big issue. That's not going away. I mean, that might be gone away in the news cycle right now, but that's a huge problem. The state exchange, I believe, if things don't improve, it will bankrupt the state. And you can't expand Medicaid. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, and then get not enough people to sign up for overpriced, higher premium health insurance plan. How are you going to pay for all that? You can't just keep digging out of the rainy day account every year. They didn't dig out of there, but yeah, I'm making it. You can't just keep what are you going to do? Raise taxes? The whole idea with government being in charge of healthcare is the exact reason why it wasn't good before. Let me get that straight. And I think that there should be a plan for healthcare. In Washington in '96, we had ACA-like reform, so it was already pretty hard here to begin with. The transition was a little bit easier here than it was for Oregon because of that. But we have to do something completely different. I do believe in taking care of those who cannot protect themselves. You know, the mentally ill, the handicapped children, but that doesn't mean, you know, they call the Medicaid expansion the welcome mat to dependency in Olympia. I think if people heard that every single day, there'd be a different mindset about it. And I think generally people are pretty upset with the fact that 300,000 Washingtonians lost their health care because of this. And I don't think that it should just be gone because we're focusing on something else in the next news cycle. There's something that can be done about all that. As far as the 35th goes, we need to start growing the economy there and we need to rebuild old industries, protect the ones we have and make them better, and then bring in whole new ones, because it's just becoming a different day and age. You need different things to survive. And right now, if you drive from Belfair to Sheldon, And you definitely drive around Shelton, you can kind of see that there's a certain level of economic disparity there. And it's not because I'm wrong, because we've had the policies of Democrats for 30 years who've had a majority in Olympia, and Democrats who've controlled a majority in the 35th for just as long. So.
All right, well, thanks for coming in. Appreciate your time.